It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Do you want a beautiful lawn? Enter TruGreen, the easiest way to get a great lawn. Just water and mow, and they'll do the rest. Weed control, fertilization, aeration, and more. TruGreen is the official lawn care treatment provider of the PGA Tour, and they have a verified best price, which guarantees you the lowest price with no compromise on quality. You do you. Let TruGreen do your lawn care. Visit TruGreen.com, TruGreen.com, to get the best lawn at the best price with the best people. Guaranteed.
We got those Friday feelings on the latest episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, diving deep into some of the top playoff performers that are boosting their upcoming fantasy draft stock. Oh, baby, it's going to be another spicy episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Looking ahead to who's popping in the NHL realm is never a bad idea, and that's exactly what we're doing on Friday's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Which stars are on the rise in the fantasy realm? Steele and I will be breaking it all down for you. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. You need to hire. You need Indeed. Steele, yesterday we spoke about some players underperforming in the postseason that are going to hurt their draft stock. This is just what happens. You remember the last bit of hockey that you've seen from these stars, and it impacts what's going on for the upcoming draft. However, we're looking at the good side of the coin today, my friend. A lot of really good players, though. I would say this, Steele, that we've obviously talked about before for the most part, but now they've kind of cemented themselves as players we need to pay attention to. We're taking a look at the players boosting their fantasy draft value. Over to you, my friend, because there are a number that you and I have highlighted before. I'm not even going to go to my honorable mentions because I think some of them are obvious, or maybe I will. I don't even remember anymore. However, these are some awesome young players, some good pieces that next year they're almost forcing themselves onto the precipice of drafting them.
Oh, yeah, you have to draft. These are all draftable players. I think maybe one player I'm going to talk about, he was a undraftable player, but one of those pick-me-ups, on a monthly basis. And I talked about him quite frequently throughout the years. So this one might be a surprise to you. But let me start with one of my favorite players from one of the favorite teams that I've talked about all season long, the blue and white, the New York Rangers. It's not Vincent Trocheck, but it is Alexis Lafreniere. He has boosted his draft stock, his draft value tremendously after the regular season and the playoffs he's having right now. Just to throw out the numbers towards everybody, career high regular season for Alexis Lafreniere, 28 goals, 29 assists for 57 points in 82 games, 40 penalty minutes. Still working on the power plays, but he had power play points, but he had 5 game-winning goals. A 12.9 shooting percentage. He's a physical player, 73 hits last year. He had 141 the year before that. He currently has 7 points in 6 NHL playoff games this season. And he had 2 big goals in game 2 against the Carolina Hurricanes. So I've loved the way that he's played, and he's interacting in that top 6 now in the New York Rangers roster. And I just think, again, you go back to, being that first overall draft pick. I said this before. I didn't like the way the Rangers were utilizing him at the beginning. He was getting shuffled up and down the lineup, but he's now found his feet. He's found his ground. He seems to be very confident with his game, and it might not be what he was doing in the QMJHL when he was dominating like we saw him do, but now that he is, again, in his 4th year in the NHL, he went from 21 points to 31 points to 39 points, and now at 57. He's jumped up tremendously. I've loved his game, and he's doing great things right now for the Rangers, who are up 2-0 in that second-round series.
And now the Carolina Hurricanes are scrambling for answers. I think there was a mention about Freddie Anderson needing a break. They have to go to Trocheck. As much as I've come on here and spoken a lot about that player. I think the message I sent to you were Canes pooched already. Yeah. And I don't even think that's an indication of their team or the quality. I think that's more so an indication of how good this New York Rangers club is. And before I even get to your point on Lafreniere, they went out there and did things a little differently at this deadline steal than they usually do. They usually go out there and make a big splash. Just most recently, obviously, Patty Kane, but they changed it up. And they went and got Jack Roslovic and Alex Wenberg. And I think both you and I kind of looked at that and went, maybe that's really an indication of how much that front office likes this team. And look at it now. You saw actually Alexis Lafreniere even himself talk about how complete this squad is. And he's a big reason why. And that second line, quote unquote, of Artemi Panarin, Vincent Trocheck, and Alexis Lafreniere are clearly clicking. So I love this angle, and it goes right into one of my favorites. So why don't we just talk about it right now in Vincent Trocheck? And look, yeah, there are a couple of players on this list deal that I have gone off about, but come on now, bro. You'll back me up on this, and this isn't a hot take. Other guys have been on Trocheck, other gals have been on Trocheck, but he is now making me look very, very good this postseason, and yeah, I got it ready. He has had phenomenal production. 4 goals, 3 on the man advantage, 4 assists, 14 hits, 12 shots on net, 4 block shots, and actually, Steele, he's winning his faceoffs at almost 70%. This guy is a fantasy darling. He's a beautician. And actually, he gets it done on the ice as well in terms of effectiveness and getting this team wins. Double OT game winner doesn't hurt things at all. Vincent Trocheck, as much as, the regular season was already probably propelling his fantasy value because of how good he was. If he keeps going like this in the postseason, this Rangers team, number 1, is going to be hard to beat. And number 2, his draft stock, he going way up the board, pal.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys. Again, we talked about his game with Joel Eriksson X. Those are the type of guys who just fill out every single peripheral that you could imagine. And his draft value and draft stock should be going up tremendously into next year's draft in September. This player, I think, might be the surprising one to you, but you actually posted him on our first Instagram post, which we're going to have to talk about after the break. Let everyone know our Instagram is now up. It's out there. You're going to have to let them know the handle at the break time. But let's talk about Dakota Joshua for a minute. In the postseason he's having for Vancouver, because Elias Pettersson hasn't shown up. He's been missing. Dakota Joshua has filled his place. He's been absolutely stellar. 3-point night in that game 1 against the Edmonton Oilers in the second round. Dakota Joshua has 7 points in 7 games. He's a +3, Unreal. 6 shot. He has a 50% shooting percentage. He's playing only 15 and a half minutes of average ice time. He has 7 blocks, 33 hits. I talked about this player a lot this season for exactly that. This was not a draftable player. He was a monthly, on a monthly basis or a bi-weekly basis pickup when you needed hits. You needed somebody to fill in an injury slot. But Dakota Joshua is making a case for himself to being one of the best bottom 6 players and maybe even boosting him up into the top 6 potentially. This is a player who he was only getting 14 minutes of average ice time in the regular season, and he had a career high 32 points in 63 games. He plays a very, very physical game. 32 points, like I said.
8 hits in game 1.
8 hits in game 1. He had 245 hits in the regular season with 40 blocks. The takeaway to giveaway ratio is pretty good as well. He doesn't shoot the puck a lot, but look at the shooting percentage. Let me get this up real quick. It's on my phone. Might as well. Shooting percentage for Dakota Joshua. Slacking right now. Shooting percentage was at a 21.4%. 21.4%.
There he is.
This is a guy who, again, he's really played well this last season, and he's making a case for himself to really get some more playing time.
Sneaky fantasy ad as well. I think you and I agree.
This is one of those guys. Sorry to cut you off, but this is one of those guys at the back end. This is not someone you're drafting in the top 10, top 12 rounds.
And deeper formats for sure. Deeper formats for sure. And you know what? You know why I got to bring up keeper dynasty side of things. He's going to be out there at the back end of your drafts, especially if it's a banger league steal, and you do get like even a quarter point or a half a point for hits. giddy up as well with the rest of the episode. We're going to be talking about players boosting their fantasy draft stock with good playoff performances. So far, we got Friday's bets. Let me just leave it at this as well, Steele. Dakota Joshua, Elias Lindholm, Connor Garland. If you don't remember, I said that could be an X factor for the Vancouver Canucks. And as much as that was an absolutely heinous, horrendous goal allowed by Stuart Skinner, that puck was going to hit the sideboard, and it hit his pad and went in the net. Doesn't matter because they got the dub. I'm not here for all the Canucks love all of a sudden. They got beat for most of that game. We're not going to go down that road just yet, Steele, but we got a lot more fantasy fire coming up. Tune back in on Monday, Steele, and I'll be breaking down all the action next week and everything you need to know for the upcoming fantasy draft. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Policy Genius. That's right. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 a year with over $1 million in coverage. That's right. That's $1 million hairs. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Steele, I don't know about you, but I never want to go through an unnecessary medical exam when I'm looking for my life insurance for my family, if you get me. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL today or click the link in the description. Steele, make sure that link is there. Get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you can save. That's Policy Genius/LockedOnNHL.
What's up, guys? Trey Matthews of Locked On Devils here, and let me tell you about Discover Credit Customer Service. Looking for an assist with your credit card but can't get a hold of anyone? Luckily, with 24/7 US-based live customer service from Discover, everyone has the option to talk to a real person anytime, day or night. Yep, you heard that right. You could talk to a real human in customer service anytime. Sounds like a real game changer if you ask me. Make the right call and get the service you deserve with Discover. Limitations apply. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. Flip, before we get back into this conversation, let everyone know out there where they can find us on Instagram.
Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod. Very simple and clean. Steele and I will be posting all of our picks, our breakdowns, live reactions. We're getting it fired up, but trust me, you want to be tapped into the IG. Make sure you're snapped over there and smash us a subscribe. Look, Steele, some of those last-minute angles, some of our favorite picks, we're going to be on there live. We're going to be dropping stories. So make sure you head over to the IG and smash that follow button. However, my friend, there are a couple of names here now on the rest of my list that I think the rest of this conversation is actually going to go fairly similarly and smoothly. If you're okay, I'll just throw it out there. Look, fantasy heads knew about Wyatt Johnston. And if you listen to this podcast, you knew about him all day long. So I'm not going to break down that angle. Just now with the playoffs on, there's even more eyes on this young player. And I think I threw out there a couple of weeks ago that even though that Canadian proposed Olympic team roster is as stacked as it is, if Wyatt Johnston keeps doing what he's doing, and I mean 65 points, 82 games as a 20-year-old during the regular season, and once again, last year, I think you and I had a podcast that was over in Italy, and you were telling me about this kid who just came out of nowhere, and he's scoring overtime and game-winning goals. Wyatt Johnston is worth the price of admission. He's once again being a difference maker for the Dallas Stars. Say what you will about the Dallas Stars and what you think of them. 5 goals, 3 assists in 8 games this postseason, Steele. Wyatt Johnston is once again, maybe it was already going up, and again, it's kind of maybe a bit of a cop-out, but you know I got to come back on here and talk about this player. He's so poised, and even if Dallas doesn't get there this year, and we're looking at Rupe Hintz and others, you know there's still going to be a regular season beast, and his fantasy value is going up, including his draft stock.
Yes, it is. And I actually remember drafting this player and ended up dropping him. I don't know for what reason I did, but it was one of the worst mistakes I did in last year's fantasy realm. So this is a kid that, again, there's a lot of this Dallas Stars team drafted amazing over the last couple of seasons. Logan Stankoven, Wyatt Johnston. Yeah, he's done a fantastic job in structuring and really drafting this team to be the team they are right now. They've got veterans, they've got their young future ahead of them, but Wyatt Johnston is just doing incredible things right now with a lot of these other young players. And I know we're going to talk about someone from the Eastern Conference, hint, one of your favorite players, but let's continue to keep it over here in the West. Sure. I got to talk about Casey Middlestat of the Colorado Avalanche. 6 points in 6 games for the Avalanche so far this postseason. 1 goal, 5 assists. And he's only playing just under 16 minutes of average ice time. He is a very young kid who has now had back-to-back 55-plus point seasons, one with the Buffalo Sabres, obviously, and a mixed season between the Buffalo Sabres and Colorado Avalanche this year after he was traded for Bowen Byram. And he's just been really good so far for them. Second-line center. He's a very young kid. Let me get his age up right here. I just want to make sure I've got this right. He's still
you better check that, not me.
25 years old. So, he's still a very young kid. I don't know why I'm calling him a kid. He's
30 years younger than Mark Giordano, so it's fine.
30 years younger than Giordano, but I've loved his game so far. And again, only getting under 16 minutes of average ice time, the second line center. This was a great trade for both the Buffalo Sabres and the Colorado Avalanche. And again, just a 57-point season in 80 games between the Sabres and Colorado Avalanche. He had 10 points in the 18 games he did play for Colorado this year. And again, just what he's doing so far in the first 2 rounds for the Avalanche. I've really liked his game so far. Needs to get a lot better in the face-off circle because that's something Colorado has struggled with over the last couple of years. But there's still a lot of time to develop that. He is only rocking at 46% in the face-off circle. So that's going to be something to work on. But the offensive game is there.
I think even by association, just now that he is going to be settled in that mix in Colorado, you might want to seriously take a look at what that's going to mean for him over the course of the regular season. And that's not to take away from what the Buffalo Sabres have going in the top 6, which clearly there's some to love there too. But moving to Colorado, the elite power play, although again, Buffalo had a really good one last year, didn't have one this year. However, I love this angle because you can't help but feel that just by, again, association, he's looking good. He's fitting in, but that top 6 in Colorado, there's not many better than that, Steele. And if he's even getting a look on the second power play unit or someone goes down and he gets slotted into that number 1, that's when, even if you're in a deeper league or week to week, you can really take a look at Casey Middlestat. I agree with you, though. Draft stock wise, that makes him a very appealing end of the draft option. Over to Seth Jarvis, Steele, very quickly, because again, I've talked about him at length. And I know he's actually been shuffled up and down the lineup a little bit now, playing with Teravainen and Jordan Staal. I really do think his natural place is with Aho and Gensel. They lost the first 2 games. They need to shake things up. They're going to Trocheck. I don't know how that's going to work. But the point remains, and this is fantasy, right? Fantasy regular season, this guy has already proven that he is a point-per-game caliber player. Now he's getting it done in the postseason, and I know he's gone a little bit dry of the past couple of games. 5 goals, 5 assists, 10 points in 6 games, Steele, to me, is cementing his fantasy value because, he's gone streaky at times. Steele, he's 20 years old.
22.
Thank you again. He's 22 years old, but still the point remains. Don't ever get me with the age again, but there we go. He's a solid player. Does he need to maybe find his confidence in the defensive end? For sure. But that's not why you draft him in the fantasy realm, and there's no doubt about it. His 10 points for the Carolina Hurricanes leads the team, I believe, and this is really propping up his fantasy draft value. That's just a fact, and I wouldn't sleep on him next year, Steele. It feels like, as much as I was early, probably 2 years ago for that breakout, it feels like he is really ready to break out if you weren't buying the 33 goals this season.
Yeah, and I also have Seth Jarvis on my list. I was trying to keep some of those players for you. I wanted Vincent Trocheck. I wanted Wyatt Johnston, but I wanted a few other players. But I did have to put Seth Jarvis on this list for many of the reasons you pointed out. 33 goals this year, a career-high 67 points at 22 years of age. And again, there's still a lot of room to develop his game as a two-way forward, but what we're seeing from him right now in the offensive zone and on the rush and, just doing what he does best and shooting the puck when he has the opportunity. He has an absolute rocket of a shot for such a young kid. 8 points in 7 games so far in the postseason has just been absolutely incredible. He's had a very strong postseason so far in obviously the first round against the New York Islanders. But, even with the 2 losses to the Rangers so far, he was very noticeable. He was very engaged every single time he was on the ice, and he had some big moments for them. So Seth Jarvis also on my list, and this goes into your keeper dynasty angle as well as one of those keeper dynasty, along with Wyatt Johnston, that you got to draft him. If you don't draft him, he's going to be on somebody's roster for a long, long time, and you want to have some of these young kids moving forward. So Seth Jarvis, great guy. I'm going to talk about one final player after the break, and then we'll get to big-time bets. But first, this episode is brought to you by Indeed. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build. You need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills. Indeed's a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. We streamline hiring with powerful tools that find you match candidates with Instant Match. Exactly over 80% of employers can get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. One of the things I love about Indeed is that candidates you invite to apply are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in search, according to the U.S. Indeed data. Even better, Indeed's the only job site where you only pay for applications that meet your must-have requirements. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Hey, everydayers. Once you're up to date on your favorite NHL team, head on over to the Locked On NHL podcast to get complete coverage of the NHL playoffs. Locked On NHL is a daily podcast breaking down every playoff series, looking at the big picture and what the games mean for each franchise, while getting you ready for games the next day. No one else is providing a well-balanced, informative take on all the NHL playoff action every single day. So don't miss an episode of Locked On NHL, available daily and part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find our episodes. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. It really does mean the world to both Flip and I. Continuing this hot content throughout the playoff season into the summer. Continue to hit the subscribe. We appreciate it. Our final players, Flip.
Yep.
I got to mention this player. It's going to be tough to talk about because he's on one of the worst teams or one of the teams I hate most. But he needs to be mentioned because he's putting himself into that conversation as one of the best goaltenders in the world. And it's Jeremy Swayman of the Boston
Swag
Bruins.
Man. Yep.
The swag man himself. Jeremy Swayman is absolutely killing it. I know he had a very rough game too. A 6-1 loss. It wasn't just him. Linus Ullmark was in there for 2 of those goals as well. But he has absolutely dominated this season and even the last couple of years. Regular season, 25-10-8 with 3 shutouts, a .916 save percentage, a 2.53 goals against average. I just want to get his playoff stats right up here quickly. 8 games played so far. He's 5-3-0. A .942 save percentage, and a 1.81 goals against average. Yeah. He has been dominating every single time that he was on the ice, except for game 2 against the Florida Panthers. And I was looking at his ADP. He was getting drafted in the 9th round. The 9th round last year. We on this podcast, we don't advocate for drafting goalies in the first round. I mean, maybe even the first 2 rounds. But he's going to be one of those goalies, one of the first goalies off the board. Maybe not the first, maybe not the second, but he will be at least one of the first 5.
Look, if we were bringing in my honorable mentions, he's right at the top of the list. And how can you not? And, Jeremy Swayman. We looked at this situation, Steele, maybe 2 years ago, looking at both of them here, who was going to take the reins. And I think both you and I kind of looked to Swayman as the guy who we liked a little bit more. And then Linus Ullmark, this is not to take anything away from that. You know how much I like to mention those angles. He just came out and played better, but then Swayman didn't actually relent. He almost got more fired up. And as much as I know that's a friendly relationship and clearly they like playing together, I think that lit a fire under Jeremy Swayman. And if this Boston Bruins team, especially after that message sent by the Florida Panthers holding them to only 15 shots on net, if they want any kind of business in terms of taking this series to 6 or 7 games, they're going to need to rely very heavily on Jeremy Swayman, because if they're looking to David Pastrnak to skate around, throw backhand punches and whatever, not taking away from Pastrnak either, they're going to be in trouble. So shout out to Jeremy Swayman, who's most definitely raised his draft stock. Carter Verhaeghe, I've talked about. He's raising his draft stock once again. Steele, he's clutch. He is an underrated name that because of how he came up in the NHL and where he's played, he is not still getting enough love. I'll leave it at that because I've been down that rabbit hole hundreds of times. And Evan Bouchard, and we've talked about him as well, but these are just names that, yeah, in most leagues, it's going to be really hard to grab even a couple of these guys. But I think, I wrote about this earlier this week. Not every GM is in a league where everyone is up on everything. And if you can even maybe steal, and I mean, EAL, steal a couple of these guys, Trocheck, Jarvis, Verhaeghe, Bouchard, combine him with one or two of your guys, your team immediately is going to be much better than it was last year. And yeah, that's easier said than done, Steele.
Yeah.
But when you see the guys getting it done to the level that they are right now in the postseason, you have to also remember it doesn't always immediately translate over into them killing it next regular season. However, what it does kind of prove to you is they are names that you should definitely have on your radar. Double circle them. Do you say, don't exactly always just jump out there and draft every single one of the players Steele and I have said on today's episode. Might not be a bad idea, but you know what I'm getting at. When you start to see these trends go, and especially players that stick around for a couple of rounds, Steele, that is when you have to remember this coming into next draft season, because clearly how they perform right now affects their draft stock. And we just highlighted a bunch of guys that are doing it in a good way and improving theirs.
Improving their value for sure going into next year. These, again, guys, you just got to put down on your list heading into next season. Double circle them, just like we will with some of these big-time bets for Friday night. Big-time bets, only 2 games on the schedule like it has been the last couple of days. Boston Bruins, Florida Panthers, Edmonton Oilers with the shocking collapse in the third period of game 1.
Arthur Shelovs once
again. That's where I'm going to start with my first 2 picks, Flip.
Hit me.
I took the Oilers money line in game 1. It was looking great. They let me down in a big way, but I'm going back to them. I'm going back to the Oilers on the money line at -125. There is no chance that Edmonton goes back to Edmonton down 0-2 in this series. -125, Oilers money line first pick. Second pick, going Oilers Canucks over 6.5 at +104.
Yes.
I think obviously what we've seen so far with just the Oilers in general in both these rounds, I would like the over 6.5 with great odds at +104. And my lock of the night, I know you said, a lot of it's going to rely on Jeremy Swayman. I think he's going to be big once again if he's in the crease for game 3. Boston Bruins on the money line at home at +104. That's my lock of the night.
Whoa, lock of the night. First playoff side bet. I don't know if I'd be comfortable taking a lock of the night with the Boston Bruins after the performance that I saw them put on in game 2. However, I like that you got that gusto. I like that you got the cojones going. I'm going to go over 5.5 as my lock of the night in that Edmonton-Vancouver game. I'm going to tease it down. I'm going to take a bootleg odd, and I'm just going to hammer it because, look, again, we mentioned Arthur Shelovs. It's a great story. This series is starting to have the makings of one that's going to throw defensive play out the door, just like the Edmonton Oilers have done the past number of seasons in terms of how they win games for the most part. So over 5.5, that's a lock of the night. That's going to go right in the same vein as McDavid, over 1.5 points. all of their big guns need to be better after game one, Steele. Stuart Skinner is included in that group. So I'm going to just go parlay that 1.5 over with the 5.5 over. And I think it's Panthers money line. It's our first side bet of the postseason. Maybe I'm biased and I really want to see Boston lose. I'll come out here and say that. Look, more credit due to the Boston Bruins, I think, than I gave them in this series because obviously they came out and did it. Sorry?
We both had Panthers in 6, so we know they're going to win at least another game.
Fair. I hope it's not this one. So give me Panthers on the money line. I think they really set the tone in game 2, and that's the angle I'm riding with. Thank me later. Yeah,
thank you later. Maybe thank me later.
Thank you later.
If you take the Bruins money line at plus 104. Hey, I'm just saying, game 1 was 5-1, 6-1, 5-1 for the Bruins. Yep. Then it was 6-1 for the Panthers. I think this one's going to be a lot closer. It shouldn't be a lopsided, but it's going to be a lot closer.
Can't get at you.
But Bruins money line, Panthers money line for both Flip and I. Mine is the Bruins lock of the night. His is Panthers money line lock of the night. Those are the picks. Those are the big time bets. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Once again, make sure you go check out Locked On Sports today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And you can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. Good luck with your bets tonight, and we shall see you back here again on Monday.
Peace.
Hey, Prime members, you can listen to this Locked On podcast ad-free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app today.